Hours to live. Tonight, Al-Qaeda threatens to kill an American hostage unless jailed militants are freed. Inflation by the gallon. Sky-high prices for gasoline and milk raise inflation fears. Is there real reason for worry? Friends call her Mama T. Her husband calls her sexy. America may one day call her First Lady. An exclusive interview with Teresa Carey. And watch closely. It's David versus Goliath all over again. We'll show you how it turned out this time.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Chilling pictures and gruesome threats tonight from Al-Qaeda terrorists holding an American hostage in Saudi Arabia. The terrorists demand Saudi authorities free other militants from jail by Friday, or the hostage, thought to be a New Jersey contractor abducted last weekend, will die. The Saudi government said it is deploying more security forces to counter Al-Qaeda violence, but there's no indication they're closing in on the hostage takers. CBS's Jim Stewart has late details.
The pictures and threat popped up on an Al-Qaeda-linked website late this afternoon. In it, a blindfolded man is seen, his head heavily bandaged. His words are slurred as he states his name.
Paul Marshall Johnson Jr., American, sir. I'm American out of the United States.
Then a man believed to be the head of Al-Qaeda in Saudi Arabia speaks, and the threat is clear. If the tyrants of the Saudi government want their American prisoner released, they must first release our Mujahideen prisoners within 72 hours from the time of this communique, or we will seek God's approval by shedding his blood. There was no immediate confirmation that the man in the videotape was the same Paul Johnson kidnapped Saturday by Al-Qaeda followers, but he resembles pictures released of Johnson, and the Al-Qaeda organization which released the tape is the same one which earlier claimed responsibility for his abduction. It is also the same group which claimed credit for a string of other attacks in Saudi Arabia on Western workers, including a hostage-taking attempt in Khobar which left 22 people dead last month. Johnson, whose family lives in New Jersey, is an employee of Lockheed Martin and worked for several years in Saudi Arabia.
My father is a very intelligent man, and I hope he's handling it.
When Johnson was first kidnapped, his abductors said it was to seek revenge for the treatment of Iraqi prisoners by Americans. A death threat, however, will only increase pressure on the Saudi government, which is looking increasingly more vulnerable in its own war with Al-Qaeda. Dan?
Jim Stewart reporting live from Washington. Thanks. At the White House today, President Bush addressed the fate of an Iraqi held by the U.S. military, Saddam Hussein. The president was asked if and when the deposed dictator will be turned over to the new Iraqi government for trial. CBS's John Roberts reports the answer was yes, he will, but when? Well, that's another matter.
He was the big prize in the liberation of Iraq. And today, appearing with the leader of Afghanistan, another nation America freed, President Bush declared he's not yet ready to hand over Saddam.
And if there's a transfer of responsibility, we want to make sure that he is secure. He's a killer. He is a thug. He needs to be brought to trial.
The pronouncement sharply contradicted Iraq's new prime minister, who said yesterday on Arab TV that Saddam would be transferred to Iraqi authorities in the next 2 weeks and stand trial as soon as possible. Sources say the president's main concern is not that Saddam will escape, but that he may be strung up from a lamppost, and is urging Iraq's leaders to ensure that doesn't happen.
We must first make sure that we can maintain protection for his life until he goes into trial.
The shortcomings of Iraq's security forces were driven home again yesterday when crowds swarmed a car bombing that killed 5 Ford contractors. Iraqi police stood around and did nothing. But rather than scolding the poor performance as he's done before, President Bush today said it's an Iraqi problem. Iraqis need to fix it.
Look, the Iraqi people are going to have to figure out how to make sure their country is secure enough for a free government to emerge. And what you're watching is a government learning how to protect itself.
The administration is keen to promote the idea that Iraqis are taking control. A poll commissioned by the Coalition Authority last month, but not released to the public, found support for the occupation has plummeted, and that Iraqis believe they'll be better off with the interim government in power. The White House is also well aware of the PR value of handing over Saddam. Sources tell CBS News tonight that while Iraqis won't get it before June 30th, they won't have to wait long, particularly if a deal can be worked out to transfer custody but still have Saddam guarded by U.S. forces. Dan?
John Roberts reporting live from the White House. In Iraq today, the U.S. military reported some civilian contractors killed in an attack on a convoy in Baghdad, but offered no details about the attack or the victims. Also today, saboteurs blew up more Iraqi oil pipelines. That cut oil exports by more than half. CBS's Elizabeth Palmer reports the real target is Iraqi hope for the future.
Relentless attacks on Iraq's huge pipeline network regularly mean power plants starved for fuel are shut down. CBS News has learned that sabotage is getting worse. There have been as many attacks on oil infrastructure in the past 2 months as there were in the preceding 6.
These saboteurs are not freedom fighters. They are terrorists and foreign fighters opposed to our very survival as a free state.
He may lay the blame on the saboteurs, but as daytime temperatures soar above 100 degrees, many blame the coalition.
One of the common questions here in this country that the U.S. managed to bring about 200,000 soldiers. Can't they manage to bring 15 huge generators?
At Radio Dijla, Baghdad's #1 call-in station, the lines are jammed with people complaining about the lack of power, some of them with tragic stories. Like this caller who claims his 3-month-old son died of breathing problems when the electricity failed at the local hospital. In spite of round-the-clock repairs to fix Iraq's crumbling electricity grid and a budget of $500 million this year alone, power supply is still not, as the coalition had promised, above pre-war levels.
It's going to probably take us between a year to 2 years to fix all the electrical infrastructure.
Until they do, the only ones to benefit will be generator salesmen. Iraqis who long ago lost faith in the coalition now struggle to believe the new Iraqi government will do any better.
We hope, but we don't think so.
Meanwhile, the rolling blackouts that are a fact of life amplify everyone's fear.
Even the security issues related to the electricity, because when you have pitch dark streets and roads, of course this will allow terrorists to have a bigger arena to play.
With terrorist attacks on the power system and personnel expected to increase, it's shaping up to be a hot, dangerous summer. Elizabeth Palmer, CBS News, Baghdad.
Violence in Iraq once helped to drive oil prices to record highs. They've fallen back some now, but not before fueling a blast of inflation here in the U.S. The government says consumer prices in May took their biggest jump in more than 3 years. So far this year, inflation is running over 5%. It was less than 2% last year. Reason for concern? CBS's Richard Schlesinger has the story behind the numbers.
What would tickle your fancy, hon?
At the Fresco ice cream shop in Richardson, Texas, they got the scoop on the inflation story before most people. Dairy prices have gone up faster than they have in almost 60 years.
There you go.
And that's forced Kelly Weingarten to raise her prices.
Each batch has gone up probably $6 or $7 in the last month.
I'll go with cappuccino.
Optimism might be melting away at the ice cream counter, but there is good news amidst the bad. A closer look at the numbers shows inflation is actually tame.
Overall, this is part of a very good news story which we've been having for the last few months now.
Economists discount prices for food and energy because they're so volatile.
Crazy.
So while ice cream prices are heating up,
$7.56,
and energy costs are on fire, experts are staying cool about the future.
Oil prices are not going to just keep on going up simply because they were high last month.
And economists say the same thing about food prices. So while overall the consumer price index shot up a scary 0.6% last month, without food and energy, it limped up a weak 0.2%. So how should you read the numbers? It depends. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? Are you a Democrat or a Republican? President Bush today wasted no time in taking credit for the numbers that show low inflation.
What I'm pleased about is the fact that our economy is strong and is getting stronger. There's strong growth.
But John Kerry, on the first day of a campaign swing on economic issues, knows anyone who buys food or gas has noticed price hikes.
Is inflation under control when healthcare costs have gone up 50% in the last few years? When gasoline prices are up 41% in a matter of months? I believe inflation is being felt by the average American.
But is inflation being felt by members of the Federal Reserve Board? That's the question investors are asking as they look to the Fed's next meeting at the end of the month. Most people on Wall Street would not be shocked if interest rates are raised, but fears of a rapid and steep rise are fading. As Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan said today, inflation will not be a serious issue in the near future. Dan?
Richard Schlesinger, thanks. Alan Greenspan's reassuring words about inflation gave Wall Street a boost today. The Dow closed up 45 points. The Nasdaq gained 25. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, if you fly, you know security lines can be long, but a new program may help shorten your wait. We'll give you the inside story. Then later, she could be the next First Lady. Tonight, a revealing talk with the multilingual Teresa Carey. But first, CBS News honors fallen heroes. Lyndon Marcus seemed headed for stardom. His high school drama teacher called him a triple threat. He could act, he could dance, he could sing. Music, that was his passion. He even recorded a demo CD. Marcus liked people, liked to make them happy, and by all accounts he did. People who knew Lyndon Marcus say he could light up a room.
Financial services.
We're looking at only 3 points.
Reduction long-term receivables.
The luxurious Hyundai XG